Well, the president tried his skills at some boardwalk games in Point Pleasant in Jersey today. Toured this Jersey Shore, not just obviously playing games, but see how far the Garden State has actually come in the 7 months since Superstorm Sandy ravaged the area. Now, Fox 1's Kimberly Wallace, she's in Asbury Park, where the president addressed a pretty enthusiastic crowd. Kim?
Rich, it wasn't the best of beach days today, but that didn't stop President Obama from touring the Jersey Shore alongside Governor Chris Christie. The president says he wants Americans to know that businesses at the shore are back up and running.
And I saw what thousands of Americans saw over Memorial Day weekend. You are stronger than the storm. After all you've dealt with, after all you've been through, the Jersey Shore is back. And it is open for business.
After stopping in Point Pleasant, the president came to the Asbury Park Boardwalk. Here, Christie introduced the president to a crowd of hundreds of local residents and Sandy victims by talking about the ongoing recovery efforts.
So while I'm thrilled at the progress we've made in the last 7 months, and we got a chance to show the president some of that earlier today up in Point Pleasant, I also made sure that he understood there's still a lot more work to do.
The president was at the shore 2 days after Sandy tore through the area. 7 months later, he says he hopes to send a message to residents of Oklahoma who are dealing with the more recent aftermath of a natural disaster.
Part of the reason I wanted to come back here was not just to send a message to New Jersey, but send a message to folks in Oklahoma. When we make a commitment that we've got your back, we mean it. And we're not going to finish until the work is done.
Hundreds of people waited for hours in the cold rain to hear Obama speak, but many of them say it was worth it.
It gave me a lot of confidence because it sounded like their government's behind us.
For the Republican governor, the president's visit may help Christie in this election year in the Democratic-leaning state. Obama also met with Democratic gubernatorial candidate Barbara Buono behind closed doors. That's the latest in Asbury Park. I'm Kimberly Wallace. Back to you, Rich.
All right, Kim, thank you very much. We're going to get into some of the questions that came out of not only Sandy, but in some of the disasters since about role of government. But I want to ask the table, and you two guys obviously had a role in government. Richard, part of the criticisms have been, forget about when money was finally approved, even when it was approved, how long it's taken and why still so much of it has been unspent here. And some people say the Red Cross shouldn't be, in effect, the vacuum where it should go into. Is there a better way to do it?
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. One of the reasons the money isn't spent isn't because people don't care. It's because they've been taught and schooled through shoving cash out the door in ways that it gets misused. So there is a bureaucratic, and it's private sector and public sector, checking and double checking to make sure the money's being used correctly. I don't say that every decision was the correct decision, but it's not as though some feckless bureaucracy is simply ignoring the needs of the people. There are processes that protect taxpayers from misuse of their money, even as we want to get the money into the hands of the people who are hurt as quickly as we can.
Tom, there's an argument that if you go to smaller organizations on more of the local level, rather than do it at a state or even federal distribution, it's going to be a lot more timely and more efficient. I know that sounds good, but is that the practical answer longer term? Because when this happens again, it will happen again. It shouldn't be 6, 7 months and still people wait and see $1.
Well, I think that going forward, they should do what a number of other states around the country have done, is that they should have the vendors already put in place. They should have already vetted some of the emergency vendors so that the repairs can be done a lot quickly. You're spending a lot of time going through RFP processes to make sure some of these vendors, fit the bill, et cetera. But Richard's right, is that, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you wind up blowing through $25 billion and you turn around and go, well, hell, we didn't rebuild the boardwalk yet, that's really bad for everybody. The main thing is that you really spend the money on the emergency type of operation. The rebuild, I think, the city is going through it right now. The city still has not finalized its final list on what it's going to spend its money with. It will get done, it'll work, but that's the process we have.
Now, what we saw after Sandy was there's politics surrounding this and what the role of government is or isn't. We saw this played out in a national debate here. Many lawmakers opposed allocating aid to our region unless there was offsets by spending cuts somewhere else. Now, both Oklahoma senators, Coburn and Inhofe, they both voted against Sandy aid not once but twice. But now the disaster has struck their home state here, as we saw with those tragic twisters. Two senators, they're split on what to do when it comes to Oklahoma. Senator Coburn, he's asking that federal aid for Oklahoma be offset by budget cuts.
My constituents they don't want us to charge our everyday living expenses to their kids, the very kids that were rescued from the school, the very kids that we're interested in. Why should we saddle them when we're wasting money?
Now, Senator Inhofe, yeah, I'll go get into that in a second. His counterpart says that he wanted reduced Sandy aid because the bill became too loaded with irrelevant things, but that he said that's not going to be the case, though, when it comes to Oklahoma.
That was supposed to be in New Jersey. They had things in the Virgin Islands. They were fixing roads there. They're putting roofs on houses in Washington, D.C. Everybody was getting in and exploiting the tragedy that took place. That won't happen in Oklahoma.
Now, forget a Democrat going after that lawmaker. How about a Republican from New York? Peter King, congressman. He's calling out Inhofe for inconsistency, saying, quote, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy involved here. Senator Inhofe says Sandy aid was corrupt, but Oklahoma won't be. But I don't want to hold the people of Oklahoma responsible for what elected officials are saying. King, he supports aid for Oklahoma without any offsets. Fair to say that it is rank hypocrisy from the two lawmakers, or do they have a point here?
Oh, Coburn's not being a hypocrite. He's being a right-wing ideological nut, and that is different than being a hypocrite. These austerity guys who claim that that spending of money now is itself a bad thing are hurting the American economy in the short run. In the long run, there's got to be something done about large unfunded obligations, no question. But in the short run, austerity is doing to the United States what it did in Europe. It's depressing economic activity, costing us jobs, costing us income. And when they go about applying that, they hurt everybody. Inhofe doesn't rise to the level of hypocrisy. Remember, he's the guy who says there's no such thing as global warming. Yeah. And watching his state suffer from the consequences of climate change, and then having him, I mean,
it was 48 degrees on Friday. Where's the global warming?
Outside the circle of arguable
storms
people.
Be kind of like when something happens like a storm, shouldn't we just be like, let's not debate this and just write the check?
No. What you should do is have a little common sense and say, listen, we have a terrible situation in New York and New Jersey. We need $60 billion. Let's not tack on $100 million in Alaska. Let's not tack in $40 million for the Virgin Islands.
These were good, important appropriations.
Then they shouldn't
needed
have been,
the money.
Then they shouldn't have been tacked onto an emergency bill, because that's what you guys do all the time. You guys just pack it and pack it and pack it with nonsense, and there's no serious debate about it.
Because they stripped it out and put it a clean one,
and they
voted
he
still voted against it.
He still voted against
it. If you know what?
Come on, let's
Richard,
what about that one?
Richard,
wait, I don't hear anything.
Let me ask you a question. You have seen the Coburn spending, the wasteful spending in government book that he puts out every year, right? It's about this thick, right? You know what I would love? I would love for you to sit here one night and read that for the people of this area and say, here's what we spend your tax dollars on. Because what I'd rather do is not be what you think I'm going to say, is just take that money and give it. What I'd like you to do, he's opposed to wasteful spending. He always has been.
Spending of all kinds, including
and you know what I would
spending
do?
on hurricane
I would much rather take all of that wasteful spending and give it to poor inner city kids and feed them and educate them, et cetera, et cetera.
But Tom,
but that's not what we do.
Tom,
that's not what we do.
I know you're not behind this thing. Don't worry, it's not broken.
Behind
what? You're not behind tonight.
Right,
no, wait, tonight. What do we got going on?
He is.
We got Ted Cruz.
He's an enabler.
Who is going to be the man of the hour here. He's the featured speaker at the state Republican
Party. And you heard what I said
York.
about that.
You think it's a stupid idea.
It's the dumbest idea ever.
It's not only dumb, it's offensive.
Right. To me, though.
It's offensive. I think it's dumb for the Republican Party in New York.
I don't know, Dom. It seems like we didn't used to have this argument about when there was a natural disaster, right? Write the check and give it to him and do it. I remember 9/11, there was a little bit of it and stuff, and then it became so bad, they said, you better not show your face in New York again.
Richard, but this is what happens. No offense to my
But
friend
it's gotten
Tom.
worse, hasn't it?
This is what happens when you let nut jobs get elected to office. This is what happens. The Tea Party folks, they don't care. They view us, the Northeast region, the Northeast region, They view us as the boogeyman, as people that waste taxpayer dollars, that we don't need the money, everybody else needs the money, we're the bad guys. Tom knows that. He knows it. But when, and Richard was right on this point. My point to you two was, can't we all get along? But Richard is good. Richard,
it took 24 minutes for race to be injected into this. Rodney King, you brought Rodney King into it.
But the argument over austerity, he's correct. These nut jobs are using that argument to ruin America, and that's exactly what they're doing.
To ruin America.
To ruin America.
So we should just spend it.
But Tom, no. But Tom,
what are you talking about?
When has it ever been the American way, if there's a natural disaster, that we don't help our own?
We did. New York, New Jersey, they had to wait a couple of extra weeks, and that was sad, and we all fought for them. They got the money. But let's not make like they're still holding out, waiting for their cash. I mean, come on, they always get the money at the end of the day.
Okay, but
not with any help from you guys.
But if
the fact
we
that we were able to carry the day, you people is what I really meant.
You guys.
You people.
You guys.
I thought that's normally
No, it never was.
It shouldn't have been this hard, is my only point. But even in the stripped down thing, that was my only point. Even the stripped down
My
thing.
Republican governor is the one who fought for the aid.
Yes, we were talking
My
about
Republican
Chris.
governor.
And by the way, just to put an exclamation point on that, I know it hadn't hurt him. He's going to win in a walk here for this governor's race.
Great
but
governor.
do you think in any way there'll be backlash in a couple of years if he chooses to run?
Look, we can't remember what we did yesterday.
Of course there'll be backlash.
The Republicans,
of course. In 2016, you know what they're going to run? In 2016, you know the shot they're going to run?
Oh, please.
In some of these other states, you know the shot they're going to run? They're going to run the shot of Obama and Christie engaging in that high five. I'll bet my life on it. That's going to be in every commercial.
His poll numbers will shoot through the roof with independent voters.
The granola faction of the Republican Party, nuts, flakes, will never forgive him for actually
doing
embracing Obama.
Richard, that is such a small
the Kenyan
faction.
Islamic communists.
Those are the same people voting for a guy who takes his junk and puts it out on Twitter. It's a small, tiny group of people.
You're telling me that the Tea Party granola faction of the Republican Party is a small faction? They run the Congress.
Let me ask you, this is what's so funny. Then how did Mitt Romney become our nominee? How did the moderate guy in our primary, the guy from day one who everybody said, he's way too moderate for the nominee, how did John McCain get the nomination? It's always the right wing, right?
You want to hear the answer?
How?
Because the nut jobs who put up the Herman Cain, the Michelle Bachmann, were so whacked out that he looked good by comparison.
Okay, so that's your answer. And then but the truth is we don't nominate wackos. We nominated Bob Dole. We nominated George Walker Bush or whatever, George Herbert Bush, whatever. I mean, we've nominated guys who are common sense conservatives, not wackos.
Michelle Bachmann.
I'm with him on this one. I don't think.
Michelle Bachmann, where'd she win?
I think people are so starving out there for anybody who can work with the other side.
Thank you.
That they will.
Thank you.
And I think even some Democrats will peel off to his side.
Richard is correct. They will never forgive him for embracing Obama. Ever.
When we come back, we're going to talk some New York politics. Specifically, he's going to try and get this thing to stick here. The New York City mayoral race here. Even though Anthony Weiner just declared already shaking things up in the polls. We're going to do that and more after this.